So let me introduce my guest. From the European Parliament, we have Mrs. Iskra Mihaylova. She is MEP from the Renew Europe group. She's actively involved in the field of energy efficiency, renewable energy sources, and energy transition towards energy decarbonization and green solutions, as well as on synergies between European policies. From the European Commission, we have Mr. Philippe Moseley from DG GROW. Philippe works in the construction unit and he's responsible for policies regarding the competitiveness of the construction industry with a focus on energy and resource efficiency aspects. And then we have Audrey Nugent, Head of Advocacy at the World Green Building Council. She's advising on sustainable buildings policies for the European regional network of over 23 national green building councils. So welcome to you three, and thank you so much for being here today. And I remind again to the participants that they can react and ask questions using the Q&A section of the webinar. So my first question goes to all of you. Do you think that the construction is a priority sector for promoting circular principles and reducing emissions? I don't know who wants to start, maybe Mrs. Mihaylova?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this very interesting webinar. And I hope we'll have a very fruitful and interesting discussion. Of course, when we know that the construction sector creates 18 million direct jobs within the European Union and contributed about 90% of European Union's GDP, we have to pay attention and answer the question, does construction sector is a priority sector to promote circular principles and reducing emissions in the moment when the whole policy of the European Union is oriented to reduction of emissions and Green Deal targets, and the whole transition toward digital economy and green economy. My answer will be yes, absolutely. The construction sector is the priority sector. It is not for occasion that this construction sector is part of the documents produced by the European Commission. And also the construction sector was in the center of the interest of the European Parliament when we worked on the problem of energy efficiency of the buildings. We prepared a special report maximizing energy efficiency in the building sector in Europe, in the building stock in Europe. So we focused at working at this report, we focused on the construction sector because of the few reasons which I will mention briefly. First of all, construction sector is responsible for the technology in the process of construction. Secondly, the construction sector is very much linked to the construction materials and all the chain which produces these materials and implement them in the buildings of Europe. Thirdly, the construction sector is actually responsible for maintaining the building stock around the European Union. And it is very important how the whole services which the building sector provides to the citizens will be maintained in the context of the Green Deal and digital transition. So definitely, yes, the construction sector is a priority.
Thank you. Philippe, do you want maybe to answer that question?
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. Definitely the construction sector is responsible for a large proportion of the waste that Europe produces, over a third I think the latest Eurostat figures we have is 36% of EU waste is coming from construction demolition, and construction also accounts for half of the resources that we extract in Europe. And so, I mean, those figures alone tell you the importance of addressing circular principles in construction. And then when it comes to emissions, you know, there are some well-known figures on the emissions coming from the use of buildings. And 40% of energy consumption is coming from the use of buildings. But when you include the embodied emissions from construction activity and the whole life cycle, it's bigger than that. It's roughly half. So, and we know that material efficiency could save quite a large proportion of those embodied emissions. So addressing those is definitely important.
Thank you. Audrey?
Yeah, I think to build on from the point that I've already, I think we're aware now of the impact, like Philippe has just said, of the sector on emissions and waste generation, and we've also got issues as well with demolition. But I think, you know, we need to go a little bit further now, and we have some policies in the EU policy framework under the EU Green Deal, the Circular Economy Action Plan, and we're looking forward hopefully for the strategy for a sustainable built environment, so that we can actually take action, I think, as a network of stakeholders across the value chain to, you know, prioritize and actually take action on the ground to drive sustainability and circularity in our sector. And I think it's really encouraging that we're seeing those signals in the EU policy framework. But I think it's up to us as a sector now to look at, you know, how do we implement and find those solutions together.
Thank you, Audrey. We touched already a bit that point in the first question, but Philippe, maybe could you tell us a bit more what the European Commission is doing to help the construction sector become more sustainable?
Well, we have a big element of the von der Leyen Commission is the European Green Deal, and one of the main building blocks of the Green Deal is the Circular Economy Action Plan that was unveiled about a year ago now. And that action plan proposed initiatives right along the life cycle of products, including initiatives for new legislation or revisions of legislation, and also non-legislative measures. And construction is one of the focus areas where, as we've heard, the current use of resources is high, but there's also the biggest potential for circularity. So we have, for example, the revision of material recovery targets in EU legislation for construction demolition waste. We are revising at the moment the construction products regulation, looking to introduce possibly some sustainability performance into that. And that would also generate some data through product declarations for construction products, and having good data is really important. And then also we have published guidance on circular economy principles for buildings design, which is a document that's on our website, and it is aimed at various target groups with guidance for how to introduce circular economy into construction projects. And then one of the sort of overarching frameworks that we should probably mention and use more is the levels framework, which is a framework for reporting and assessing sustainability against various indicators, including circularity, but also pollution, water, waste, all kinds of indicators in there. And the levels framework is went through a pilot phase. It's now being used, it's published, it's online. It's a really good way to measure and report on sustainability indicators, and we definitely encourage the whole industry to be taking up measures via the levels framework and really putting it into practice.
Thank you. Mrs. Mihaylova, what is the position of the Parliament on what the European Commission is doing?
We expect part of the proposals, legislative proposals from the European Commission. Some of them are now on the level of public discussion. Some of them we know that are almost prepared, and we expect to receive them in the European Parliament. And to work on them to be sure that the co-legislator in the face of the Parliament will be on the track of the time, because it is very important to have all these legislation ready to support the construction sector. But I should add something which is I think very important, the other initiatives of the European Commission, which are very well supported by the European Parliament. And on the first line in this will be the renovation wave, a very important initiative which is extremely useful for the construction sector, especially after the crisis with the pandemic of COVID-19. And renovation wave will give opportunity to construction sector, first of all, to recover after the crisis, and secondly, to implement all the principles of the circular economy and all the principles of energy efficiency for the building stock in Europe. And of course, I would like to mention just partially, I'm not going to open this discussion, but I would like to mention the Bauhaus initiative, which is on the first view, it's related to the culture, education, and environment. But looking deeply, we see that the responsibility of the construction sector in this initiative is extremely important, because it will bring the Green Deal principles and circular economy principles to the life of every one of the citizens in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. Audrey, you represent the World Green Building Council. Can you please tell us a bit what this organization is about, and what the campaign At Building Life deals with?
Yeah, so World Green Building Council is a network of 70 green building councils who operate around the globe. So we're essentially an umbrella organization. And what our green building councils do at the national level is they bring together actors across the value chain to drive sustainability in our sector. So hopefully many of you guys on the call will be familiar with the work of our green building councils, but in each country their approach might be different. So some focus on certification tools. So for example, the DGNB tool in Germany. Others are more focused on, advocacy, education, and awareness raising. But what each of them does is they bring together the value chain in their country to drive sustainability in their sector. And increasingly, especially in Europe, our attention is turning towards looking at, buildings more holistically and across their whole life cycle. And that's what the Building Life project is about. So this is a European regional project of World Green Building Council. And what we're doing is bringing together a coalition of green building councils in Europe to recognize the potential that our sector, the built environment sector, has in delivering on the goals of the EU Green and the Paris Agreement. And what we're calling for in the project is for regional, so that means EU and national policymakers, to start supporting more ambitious policies to tackle the total environmental impact, so carbon and resource related, of the built environment. So what we would like to see as a first step is that, policymakers move beyond just considering the operational emissions from a building, but start to consider both operational and embodied, the so-called whole life carbon, in an integrated manner. And in order to achieve these goals, we're undertaking a series of activities across a number of different areas. So we've got a communications campaign, which is calling for greater action, and that's bringing together industry and policymakers. And we're also, actually figuring out how to make this a reality. So we're bringing together a group of leaders representing organization in Brussels and beyond to help steer the development of an EU policy roadmap on whole life carbon, and having that developed in a consensus way with that diverse sector of stakeholders so that we're really representing the views of the people who work in our sector. So I think, we're also looking at, what are the policy recommendations we can make to move towards whole life carbon, but also how do we actually implement these policies? Because if you're going to make recommendations that the European Commission should start considering whole life carbon, you need to make sure that at the national level, at the European level, there's an infrastructure in place to support that policy ambition. So how do you create the databases needed to support that? How do you build the capacity of the sector to implement these new requirements? What is the role of existing directives like the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, for example? It's to understand all of these different elements and bring them together and come up with something that is, useful for the sector, but also has an impact in terms of the emissions that our sector has and that we're delivering on the goals of the EU Green Deal. So it's a really, really ambitious project. But we're hopeful that the way in which we're going about it will bring together the value chain. We can build that consensus and we can come up with something that works for our sector. And we would invite anyone on this call who's listening, who is interested in this, to either get in touch with myself or your local Green Building Council, because those roadmaps that I talk about at the EU level, that process is going to be replicated across 10 countries in Europe as well. So looking at it at the member state level also.
Thank you. So yeah, you expect a lot from the EU policies, of course, to help you on that.
Hopefully, but there's still a long way to go.
Good. I'm just checking if we have. I think we had one question in the Q&A, but I think we answered it already. So let's wait for the next ones. I have a question, maybe more for Mrs. Mihaylova and for Philippe. Of course, many European countries are, not to say all the European countries, are still very much preoccupied with the COVID-19 pandemic. According to you, how can a circular, low-carbon construction sector contribute to Europe's green recovery?
This is the question of the moment. You are absolutely right. And I should say that most of the member states now work on their national plans for recovery and resilience. And it is very important to see the place, the role, and the opportunities given by these plans to the construction sector. Because in the middle of recovery is reconstruction of part of infrastructure, investments in the renovation wave, investments in green technologies, and investments in digital transitions. This is what we expect from the national plans, and I hope that the construction organizations of construction sector in the member states will be proactive during preparation of the national plans for recovery and resilience, and will advocate the position of the construction sector, because it is extremely important, as Audrey already mentioned, not only on the level of the construction itself, but also in the level of the whole life cycle of the buildings and constructions and infrastructure, because it will bring real results concerning the Green Deal targets and circular economy and digital transition, but also will bring this the opportunity what we expect for the construction sector recovery. So we expect that already in 2021 and in 2022 we will have higher rates of the construction's activities in the member states, and these national plans are the key answers for the member states, and we expect this national approach because the direction is already given by the European Commission and supported by the Parliament.
Thank you. Philippe, do you want to answer this question too?
Yes, I fully agree. The National Recovery and Resilience Plans, which are using this special money in the EU budget to recover from COVID, are they're going to be coming our way for the Commission to comment on them, and we've already been seeing some drafts from the member states, and it's good to see a big element in there of building renovation foreseen in many of these plans, and so what we've been doing is giving feedback and encouraging them to integrate circularity questions when it comes to building renovation. For example, by deploying or setting up urban recycling platforms and facilitating reuse of construction materials and products. And this is all very much in line with the renovation wave strategy. So, looking forward over the next decade or so, I mean, that strategy is looking to create several 100,000 new jobs, enormous investment needed for renovation. There's a target to renovate about 35 million building units over the decade to 2030. More than doubling the annual rate of building renovation. So this is going to create a lot of construction activity. This is a big driver for employment, which is obviously good in the context of recovering from COVID, but we need to do this in a resource efficient manner so that we don't simply add, with all this new activity, add to a waste problem and a resulting greenhouse gas problem. We need to do it in a better way, and that's why a lot of these circularity principles and the digitalization of the industry as well are ways to do that, to work more efficiently with fewer resources in a better way.
Thank you. We may have more questions about COVID, either from me or from the audience later, but there is another topic that I would like to address with you too. It's the green public procurement. What are the opportunities for the construction sector in engaging in green public procurement contracts? And what are some other ways by which construction companies could be motivated in increasingly using circular solutions and acting accordingly to the principles of the circular economy? Philippe, do you want to answer that maybe?
Yeah, I mean, green public procurement is an excellent way for action to be taken really at the city level or local level. So it's not always, national or EU level where action can be taken, because public procurement can require, for example, certain metrics to be reported at a local level, or put conditions on building permits, and these are all things that local authorities are in control of, and so they can really support greater use of circularity in their area and drive a sort of a green transition in that way. So that procurement is really a very powerful tool, I think, to integrate these questions, and so for the industry to engage with those as well is really important.
Thank you. Mrs. Mihaylova, do you want to say something on that?
I'm fully agree with Philippe. This is a very powerful instrument to continue with the Green Deal goals and circular economy on the place of each one of the infrastructural projects around the European Union. And I will support him in his vision that it is a moment when the only construction sector cannot manage itself. We need the partnership with the local authorities and regional authorities, which will create the circumstances and which will create the requirements for the green public procurement. And it is very important to create this partnership between local authorities, regional authorities, and construction sector. And also another point which is really very important, and I don't think we will have enough time to discuss it today, but to mention it. This is about qualification, education, and training of the labor in the construction sector. because requirements for the green public procurement are requirements for the construction sector. And the level of qualification, the level of knowledge of the labor in the construction sector is extremely important. And this is message for all the representatives of the construction sector, because we do understand, we try to put on place all the programs which can help the construction sector to improve and raise the quality of qualification. But this is a question of initiative of each one of the companies, and to be active, to be on place with the green public procurement and be responsible. It's mean to create the whole construction in the architecture of the organization of the company. So just to mention education, qualification of the labor force. Thank you.
Thank you. Audrey, is there something you want to say?
Yeah, I think, I mean, that some really good points have already been made, but I think just to build on, you know, when we're talking about, you know, how to start thinking about embedding sustainability into the policy framework, procurement is often the first step that people look towards. And I was speaking to a cities network the other day who were looking at integrating, you know, embodied carbon into their policies, and procurement, you know, was a tool that they use. And I think that point has been made. And I think just that point on, you know, education and awareness, that's really important as well, because if you're starting to, for example, some of our GBCs are looking at how to align some of the leveled indicators with procurement criteria and working with local authorities and building the capacity to do that. You need to understand, in this case, you know, what levels is and how do you align that with procurement. And that's super important, because that goes back to the point of, you know, creating that infrastructure to implement these policies. You need the education, you need the awareness, you need the skills, you need the data, and procurement is a way to help you start building those things, you know, from the bottom up. At one point, I think was interesting, one of our GBCs mentioned it to me recently. He said it shouldn't be green public procurement, it should, procurement by its nature should just be more sustainable. So actually, should the language be shifted there? That's for another webinar, maybe.
I'm afraid. Thank you. We have some questions from the audience. So because time is running out, I want to read the first one, and it's maybe more for Philippe. Is there a framework to calculate the impact of construction machinery in terms of the circular economy? What measure can be implemented to include construction machinery in the circular economy rethink, particularly when machinery reaches the end of its life?
That's a good question, isn't it? So construction machinery, I mean, I think well, I mentioned already the levels framework, which is the overall sustainability framework for construction and buildings, which has various indicators. We're actually still working on levels, although it's published and it's up and running and usable. There are still some additional indicators that may be added in future, and we're also working on a web tool to be able to use it more efficiently, and some more guidance which will appear on the Levels website. So that would be the logical place to have it. I don't know now whether there is specifically something at the moment in there for construction machinery, but certainly it's an area in general that needs addressing. I know that there are moves in some member states already to look at zero emission construction sites, and so this is definitely something that is moving in some member states, and I mean, we don't have yet an EU level policy on this, but we're keeping an eye on it.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we have 3-5 minutes before we have to finish our panel, but I've received also another question, which is probably for all of you. How do you see the role that rental, so construction equipment rental, can play in transitioning towards a circular and low carbon construction sector? I don't know, Philippe, do you want to go on? on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard, we're hearing more and more about products as a service, and you know, there are some examples of equipment like lifts being offered as a service rather than a purchase in buildings, which is an interesting development. And rental as a kind of business model in itself can be more sustainable sometimes, because it can increase the amount of time, or the amount of time that the equipment is used. So the more it's being used in service, the better. And so this is the kind of system that can work quite well to use our resources more efficiently in that way. So yeah, there's definitely a place for it. I mean, we don't have you know, an EU level position on rental as such for construction equipment, but it's certainly an interesting idea to keep an eye on.
Thank you. Mrs. Mihaylova, do you want to give us your opinion on that?
Of course, I will continue. Actually, to just a remark, I'm very glad that today we demonstrate a good coordination between the Parliament and the Commission. In many cases, we react strongly in the Parliament and we ask all the time something, but in this particular case concerning the construction sector, it seems like we are satisfied and we are working in the same direction. Of course, we expect the proposals for the directives, but anyway, it is visible today. I will continue in this way. This is not a subject to be regulated, I think. This is a subject of the free decision of the business. And it will be mostly discussed probably in the second panel. But what I can say is that from our political point of view, it is important to give as much as possible freedom to the construction companies and building organizations for maintenance of buildings, to be open for any decision which will bring to achievement of circular economy goals and Green Deal goals. And rental of construction equipment is one of these options which should be used. But again, I repeat, this is not a question of regulation. This is question of understanding and new culture.
Thank you. Audrey, do you want to react on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, renting is inherently a more sustainable model than more traditional ways. So I think, you know, in that regard, you're already kind of addressing some of those issues. And I think as well, I know you're going to present the calculator in a moment, but having that transparency on the impact, you know, enables people to make decisions with the correct data. And I think that's also really important as well. So.
I see that more questions are arriving, but unfortunately, if we want to stay on time, I need to put an end yet to our panel. Of course, we will have a look at the questions. So thank you for going on asking them on the Q&A section. I want to thank Mrs. Mihaylova, Mr. Moseley, Audrey Nugent for their participation to this first panel. And well, I hope you will be able to stay with us for the second part of our event.